Welcome everyone to another in our Roth IAMS webinar series. We have a good one for you today. We're going to get started in a couple of minutes. We're just going to give folks a few more minutes to join and then we'll be kicking it off. Okay, folks. Again, welcome to another in our Roth IAMS webinar series. This week we have a very interesting webinar from Aidan Townsend, our Asset Data Management Service Lead. And before we get going and turn it over to him, the usual housekeeping notes. If you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We will have room at the end of the presentation for a Q&A session. There will be poll questions throughout the webinar, so if you can please participate in those are good for us all understanding and sharing some helpful information. And then, of course, at the end of the webinar, there is a survey that we ask you to fill out so we can get your feedback and continue to produce webinars that you're interested in. And the last piece of it is after the webinar is over, we will be sending out an email to everyone with a link to the deck and a link to the presentation, the webinar recorded presentation rather. Sorry, excuse me for that. But other than that, I think we're good to go, and I will turn it over to Aidan Townsend.
Hello, everyone. I will apologize right off the beginning. I've got a bit of a cold, so if I cough or sneeze through there, I apologize for that. But yeah, let's get started. So today's webinar, we are going to talk about data management and the importance of not letting your data rot on the vine. So as far as an agenda goes, we're going to do a brief introduction. We're going to talk about some of the challenges facing facilities management staff in data side, as well then going into the building a solid data management foundation. So what that means, how to do it, turning some of that data then into actionable intelligence and what we can do with it, some tools and strategies for success, and then as Amanda mentioned, there'll be some QA at the end and some resources that we'll send out, and then next steps if you need some additional information. So by way of introduction, my name is Aidan Townsend. I'm the practice lead of data management service here at Roth IAMS. I have a 30 years experience here in this field, working from the design side. I have a diploma in architectural technology, have worked doing design and construction in different organizations. As well, in a previous career, I worked for one of the district school boards here. I'm in Ontario, and led the asset management and condition assessment program for that school board, as well as worked on selecting CMMS software that we use for the board, and a number of other things. And then, eventually moved into the asset management side of things. And then here at Roth IAMS, work with the data management side. Again, all things related to those, physical assets that we're talking about. So we're going to start off with a quick poll question for everyone. The poll question being, how confident are you right now with the accuracy and completeness of your facility asset data? So we'll give everybody a minute to answer that question. So it's ending up sort of how we expect there, that we've got the majority of people are somewhat confident in their particular data. 16 responses. Okay, so we're almost through. Give everybody another minute. I would say a good third of people are either not very well, actually probably more than a third. 40% of people are either not very confident or not sure about the quality of their data. So that's really telling, and sort of leads into, you know, where we're going to end up here with, the data challenge that faces people in facilities management. So we're going to start off with talking really about the sort of the complexity and scale of the ecosystems within those institutions. And what I mean by that is institutions, particularly those like colleges, universities, hospitals, large corporations, municipalities, and other government organizations, manage many different types of buildings and spaces, and they're spread across many different locations, right? Each of those has its own unique requirements. They have their own systems and different uses. So this ecosystem of buildings and other assets really is complex and large scale for a number of reasons. So one of those reasons is the diversity of the facilities. So in this case, we're talking about the buildings. Institutions typically will have a wide range of buildings, academic halls, dormitories, labs, libraries, sports centers, admin offices, clinics, fire stations, water treatment plant, wastewater. And each of those facilities has a different function, different layouts, different operational needs, and different maintenance requirements. And then within each of those facilities, we have numerous assets and systems, right? And each of those buildings contains many different elements and systems, whether it be HVAC, electrical, plumbing, infrastructure, elevators, safety equipment, security systems, IT networks, and the list goes on and on. And they're very specific to the different types of facilities that we have. And each of these assets may require like regular monitoring. They're all going to require some kind of maintenance, potentially some upgrades, and maybe even compliance checks. And then as we look at geography, in the case of colleges and universities, for example, facilities often span across large campuses. So we have multiple buildings on a single site, or maybe even multiple campuses. And sometimes those campuses are in different cities or different regions. Municipalities may be single tier municipalities, lower tier, upper tier, and maybe spread across different regions, counties, cities, towns, villages, districts, or wards. And each of those might be functioning independently. So this geographical spread makes it very challenging to keep track of everything and standardize all of those processes. When we look at facilities and assets themselves, each of them go through many different phases, from design to construction to commissioning, daily operations, maintenance, renovation, and eventually decommissioning. And what we have to make sure is that information is collected and updated and then passed on through each phase of that life cycle, and include all of the different stakeholders that are involved in that facility. So with this volume and variety of data, every stage of that life cycle generates large and diverse amounts of data, and it can come in different forms. So we have blueprints, commissioning, documentation, warranties, maintenance logs, work orders, compliance reports, renovation plans, and more. And that data comes in many different formats. It could have paper records, spreadsheets, digital formats, maybe on the back of a napkin sitting at a Tim Hortons somewhere. And it's all managed by different people in multiple departments. So when we talk about the numerous stakeholders that are involved, we have teams like the facility managers, we have engineers, we have sustainability officers, finance people, administration, external vendors maybe have access to some of our records, compliance officers and reports, and coordinating and sharing all of that information between all of the players is very complex. And this is where having a solid asset management team is very valuable. So, why does this matter? Because facility ecosystems in these institutions are so vast and intricate, managing their data is very challenging. Without clear strategies, information can get siloed, become outdated, or even lost. And that harms the decision making, compliance, planning, and efficiency. And this is why robust data management is crucial. One of the things I forgot to mention in the introduction, I'm currently working on getting my certification as an asset management professional. And through my courses, one of my classmates actually in our discussions wrote this example, and I asked if I could quote it because I thought it really embodied what we wanted to talk about here and why things matter. So this is from one of my classmates. A perfect example is our planned asphalt overlay project. This initiative embodies the coordinated, closed-loop life cycle approach. The business case was built using operational performance data from our CMMS, which showed rising maintenance work orders, and then condition data from our GIS system. The data-driven approach ensured the project was selected based on its value in mitigating negative risk while ensuring service continuity. The precise asphalt mix design, layer thickness, core test results are all linked to the asset record in the CMMS and the GIS layer. And this ensures that operational team has the correct data for future maintenance planning and pavement management models right from day one. Post-project, we track performance against the forecasted KPIs by monitoring work orders in the CMMS and updating condition in GIS. This data is fed back into our asset management planning software, closing the feedback loop to validate the investment's ROI and improve future strategic models. This ensures that the project is value delivery initiative and not just a construction activity. It was justified by data, executed with clear objectives, and will be measured against its business case, fulfilling the aim of asset management to have assets that are appropriate to business needs and effectively supported. So here in that example, we can really see how having complete, accurate, up-to-date data not only supports what we know, but also what we need to know and how we plan for the future. The next slide I have here for you is from a presentation by John Hardwick, who at the time was the Executive Director of Roads and Maritime Services in Sydney, Australia. This was originally presented in 2017 at Main Train, which is the annual conference put on by PMAC, Asset Management Association of Canada. So as we look at this, we know that we all have assets, and those assets are there to perform functions. And that function is what we are trying to keep the asset fit to do. And then because we have those assets, we capture data about those assets. And this could be all kinds of different data depending on what those assets are, whether they're facilities or a piece of equipment or a road or whatever that is. But what we have to understand is that historically, most of the data that we capture is not really used. So then because we have such enormous amounts of data, we need to create systems. So we put all of these data in these systems. And one of the things that we need to think about as we're putting data in these systems is not what we want to do with it now, but what do we want to do with it in the future? And then we have to design those systems to take that data and be able to, look at it in a forward-facing way so that we can use it. So we have all of these assets with all of these data in our systems, and this creates information. And as we all know, information is power, and it allows organizations to perform well if they have accurate, up-to-date information. And one of the things that we can do with that information is some analysis, right? So in this analysis of all of this information, we can gain insights about whether we should make changes to those assets, whether it be from a maintenance point of view, an operational point of view, a renew or replace point of view. And then, so now we have another poll question. We'll jump in here. So as we look at the information that you have, what is the biggest data management challenge that you face currently? So again, as expected, we're 58% so far. People find keeping the data up to date probably the most challenging. And tied directly to that is current practices and resources, people. So how do you keep your data up to date if you don't have a way to do it or people to do it? So the next section that we're going to talk about then is building a solid data management foundation. So this will hopefully help give some guidance into how to do that. So as we talk about best practices in data governance, really what we want to focus on here is part of the role of this data governance plan that you hopefully may create is preventing that data decay. It's important that we have consistent data documentation, that we implement a standardized metadata schema, and then define tools and techniques for tagging and cataloging all of those data assets that you might have. Data ownership and accountability assigns clear responsibility for data upkeep via data stewards and owners, and ensures regular audits, updates, and checks for accuracy. Establishing standards and protocols is an important part of that, as well as implementing controls and the protocols for handling change. So as information changes, as we can see, the highest rank here is everybody keeping their data up to date. So it's great to have that. You might get initial commissioning reports or design specifications, but then what happens when things change? So we need to understand where the sources of those changes are coming from, what systems they'll go into, if there's regulations regarding those particular changes, and then also what can cause that data to become inaccurate, and especially as we look at ignoring those changes or not updating information, then our data is going to become inaccurate and stale. So ISO 8000 series contains really good information around data quality. There's a lot of documentation in this particular series. Here I've highlighted a few, and again, I have links to all of these, to all of their resources in the website. If anybody's interested, let me know and I can share this with you. But 8000-1 is really just an overview around data management. 8000-2 then gives some language and vocabulary around it so that everyone's talking the same language. And then we get into an overview of the data quality management itself, creating some rules for that data management. And then 8000-100 talks about exchanging information. Again, just an overview, but then we get into specifics, right? So we talk about syntax and semantic encoding, and 8000-15 then gets into resolution. So what happens if you have naming conventions across different systems that don't align? 8000-118 is also a really interesting one where we talk about natural location identifiers. And really what that means is when we're talking about pieces of land or things that don't have, they're not in a building or with a municipal address, how do you identify those, either with GIS coordinates or longitude, latitude, or whatever. And then the 800140 just really sort of sums everything up and gives some overview about completeness of the data and why and how that becomes important. So again, as I mentioned, I'm happy to send these out for those of you who are interested. After, just let us know. And then we move into kind of progressing into digital record keeping. So hopefully, people are starting to move into this particular phase of their data management at this point, based on the fact that there are so many different systems out there. Maybe moving into some kind of a centralized system versus siloed data in different departments. And again, I know that's really difficult because we have, as mentioned, we have different types of people working in different things. Geographic area might have some constraints on that, but there are many different types of software, and hopefully you can get things working together. Part of it then is transitioning from paper or manual records that you might have. There could be years of historical information, and how do you get those onto a digital platform? Right. So we talk about data creation and capture, ensuring that you have quality right from the start. So when we talk about those systems back in the pyramid, like, what do you want to capture? What do you want to use it for? Not only now, but in the future. And then we talk about storage strategy. So again, we're looking at formats and systems. Are you using a cloud-based digital storage solution, or using something in-house? Is it an off-the-shelf product? Maybe something that you've made, or something that is off the shelf but you've customized. We talk about then also setting different retention schedules and archiving protocols. So how long do you need to keep that information? Or what happens if an asset is retired? Do we just delete it? Do we archive it somehow so that if you need to pull historical records, you can go back and find those records? Also, something we need to talk about is security and compliance information. So again, we have, I think we might have some people here from across North America. So if you are in Canada and you're using a cloud-based solution, is your data being stored in Canada, or is it in the US, or vice versa? If you're in the US, do you need to maintain your data in the country of origin? So that's something also to consider. And then managing user access is a really big one, right? So we want to make sure that the people that need to have access to the software have access to the software, but also don't have the ability to create unauthorized changes to the software, or we want to make sure that there's prevention of accidental loss if someone deletes something by accident. So just having those user permissions set up and knowing who needs to do what is also an important factor. And then we talk about master data management, and this really, I think, is an important one, especially in today's day and age. Everyone emails documents to each other. So let's say we write a specification for something and you email it to someone else. They make changes and email it back. Well, now all of a sudden we have multiple versions of that particular file. So what becomes the single source of truth for your data? right? So we want to make sure that we minimize conflict or redundant information. You save a file in a folder on your drive, someone else saves it on their drive. Which one is the most up to date and the most accurate? And part of that, single source of truth, that master data management, also prevents the decay of that data. So we always know which one is up to date. So another quick poll question as we talk about digital record keeping. So what describes your current method of managing your facility data? Oh, do we have, yeah, so everything digital, mostly paper, or really not sure? Okay, so the majority of people, it seems, are either all digital or mostly digital, which is, really great. There's a few people that have mostly manual and paper. So for those, well, two people so far on the survey, I would pose the question: what is the plan to get those things digitized? So one of the reasons why we want to also digitize things is, loss of that institutional knowledge. So if someone leaves the organization, someone retires, if they have all those things written down somewhere, how is anyone else ever going to find that information? So as we look at lifecycle data management, we want to make sure that we capture information at every phase, as we talked about before, right from, a needs analysis through design, acquisition, operation, maintenance, and then right into decommissioning. So if we can automate some of those routines for the data management tasks, that would be really great. And again, a lot of software can help manage through that. Leveraging those cloud storage software opportunities, new technologies that are out there, excuse me, and then coming up with a plan to migrate that legacy data into those current systems. And as I mentioned before, we want to look at those current systems. And as we are planning those and developing those, let's not think about how we want to deal with it today or tomorrow. Let's look 5 to 10 years down the road, because if you look at how you want to deal with your information now, by the time you implement it, the technology will have changed and you'll already be, behind the eight ball, as it were. So as we look at managing all of this life cycle data, ensuring that data is consistently updated and validated is also a really important point that we've talked about previously. And then, so now how do we take all of this data and turn it into, actionable intelligence? So we've taken all our data, we've built our systems, we've got it all in there. What do we do next? So, being able to leverage all of that data for reporting and planning. We want to have defensible data for campus planning, budgeting, compliance reporting, and being able to, in the example that we use from my classmate, pull all of that work order data to understand that, that particular asset was deteriorating, and what are we going to do about it? One of the other things that, once we have all this data in there, you can then start to look at trends, as well as some forecasting needs, and, use this information to guide those renovations or upgrades. Again, like we talked about in that previous example of the paving, how, that work order maintenance history allowed us to determine that particular road needed to be worked on. The other thing we can do as we're looking at this really is talk about supporting sustainability or other operational initiatives. So as you're looking at planning renewals of elements or assets within your facilities or the facilities themselves, Having energy audit data or accessibility audit data to inform the plans as you build those plans, so that, at the same time, if we look at, replacing the front door of a building, for example, because it's past its useful life and maybe it's got some air infiltration or water infiltration, are you putting power door operators on that front door at the same time, right? So we can get that additional information to help inform how we move forward. So we talk about collaboration, right? Developing business cases from needs analysis, coordinated closed loop life cycle approaches, again, that we talked about in an example of paving, using up-to-date data to drive those business case analysis and acquisitions, and then tracking the operations and maintenance performance against those forecasted benchmarks, right? It's really important. We want to make sure that we're not just replacing or renewing something and not tracking how well it performed. And again, just talking about regulatory compliance. So, there's lots of new regulations coming out about a number of different things all the time. So we want to make sure that we're able to report on that information, documenting and demonstrating those compliance in with our data so we can pull it all together. So some tools and strategies for success. So as we talk about aligning facilities management with institutional missions, translating those data insights into impactful decisions that support broader goals, may include integration from different software platforms that we've talked about. In a previous webinar, we've talked about our MVP, or our multivariable prioritization, and which high is higher. So priority scores in your condition assessment data, or just even condition data assessment on its own, is only one part of the business decision process. So having other information able to help inform those decisions is very important as well. And then, training staff. So educating the stakeholders about the importance and the value of your data governance, gaining leadership support by linking that data governance to business goals such as compliance, energy efficiency, and risk mitigation. Fostering cross-team collaboration, right? So identifying key stakeholders from IT, business, legal, compliance, and other relevant departments, and then assigning roles to those people to be data stewards or data owners or custodians, even if it's very informal at first. And then establishing that cross-functional committee to guide efforts and maintain that accountability, right? So get all those people together and have them work through and make sure that everyone is keeping data up to date. And we want to encourage that proactive data maintenance. So inventory your data, where is it stored, what systems and processes are in place, who currently owns the data, identify the pain points that you have. And we can see from our polls that, I think the pain points here are a lot of people don't have a system or the resources in place to maintain it. So we want to make sure that we are keeping our data consistent. We have documentation. We have rules about how and when to update it. And keep early goals simple and aligned with your business needs. Things like reducing reporting errors or reporting time, ensuring data privacy and compliance, and then supporting decision-making with trustworthy data. And we want to prioritize some of those quick wins, right? So let's focus on solving some immediate high impact problems that we've identified as we're looking through what we need to review within our data management. And then document and celebrate those successes with your team, with your leadership. Things like reporting. You could say, it used to take us 4 days to run this report. All of our data is digitized now, and we were able to do it in a few hours, and it's more accurate. So those are the types of things that we want to look at to help build some success. So imagine with all of this data that you have and it's up to date, we can really shift our thinking from, as we're doing planning and renewal work and business needs analysis, shifting that mindset from what can go wrong because we don't have enough information to what can go right because now we know everything. Again, another quote from one of my classmates says, "Too often data is positioned defensively as a safeguard against errors or inefficiencies. By focusing on trusted data as an enabler, we're shifting the conversation toward growth, innovation, and value creation. Building that foundation not only reduces uncertainty, but it also accelerates decision making and unlocks confidence across the organization." And I think that's really key, because as you start to learn to trust your data, you can build that confidence across your organization. So as we talked about before, when we have our assets, we have our data, we have our systems, we have our information, and we have our analysis. And really all of this becomes part of the managing of your assets. And the next step that we can get into then, once we have some data and we know that it's up to date, is we can start building out models. And with the models, if your data is accurate, you're going to get good models, right? So if we're looking at replacing an asset or replacing a building, we can build out some models for that. But if your data quality is poor, it doesn't matter how good your model is, you're not going to get a good outcome from bad data. So with the models that you've built, you can create some informed decisions, and those informed decisions are where we can start to prioritize things. And then from those prioritized, informed decisions, we can develop some options. And in developing those options, we can then make justified investments in our assets, whether it be buildings as a whole or individual components. It connects the entire organization together, and this is where we get into true asset management. So, last poll question. If you discover that your asset inventory is outdated or missing some renovations, what is your best first step? Okay, so I'm glad that nobody says start from scratch and recreate the entire database. Pretty much everyone is in the prioritize and update high impact or high value assets first. That's great. A few people say we don't even know what we have, and for those people, if you need some help with that, reach out to me afterwards. I'm sure we can help you with that as well. Definitely, we have prioritize that. Some people, waiting till next year was an option, but I'm glad to see nobody did that. And the best option, ignore until we do our audit again in 5 years. I'm glad nobody selected that either, because we really want to make sure that we do have up to date and accurate information as we move through. So if we're looking at a building and you get a facility condition assessment and you don't update your data for 5 years, that condition assessment data is great for, probably 30 days, once every 5 years, because, you're doing maintenance work orders, you're doing capital projects. So if you're not keeping it up to date, it certainly isn't, it loses its value as you move through the timeline. Okay, so I think that kind of wraps up my my presentation at this point, and I can open it up now for some questions. I don't know if there's a poll question or if we're just doing questions here.
We'll just do some questions here, Aiden,
Sure.
this is the opportunity, those on the line. If you have any questions and you want to just type them into the chat, Aiden can answer them here. But as always, if you leave the webinar and you have a question, we have a slide coming up that has Aiden's contact info, and you can reach out to him at any time. So if you have a question, please type it in the chat. Maybe you just answered all the questions, Aiden.
Maybe.
Okay, do you want to advance the slide
Sure.
to the one with your, I would ask again, take a look at the QR code here. This is where you'll find more thought leadership articles on our website. And then in the next slide, can we have the next slide?
We can.
There you go. So once you leave, if you think, yeah, I want to ask Aiden a question, take a snap of this or go find it when we send the deck out to you, and you'll be able to connect directly with Aiden. So we have the end of the webinar survey, folks, so please stick around and do that as well. Otherwise, we have no questions, so that
No
would
questions
be
at all. Wow.
no questions at all. So you gave people a lot to think about. So
And I realize it is a lot of information to take in a very short period of time. But as Amanda said, we're happy to help if you want to reach out. I'm happy to have a one-on-one conversation with anyone about, how you can work through some of this.
Yeah, so we'll be sending the follow-up links out. Oh, yes, Louise, we are going to, following the webinar, we send out an email, and it'll have a link to the deck as well as a link to the webinar recording. So great, folks.
Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Thank you for attending, and we'll have another Roth IAMS webinar coming up in 2 weeks, so hopefully we'll see some of you back here then.